Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and thank you for joining us here this morning. I know that you may not be very happy with us because we might have broken your plans to have a long week after the public holiday yesterday, but nonetheless, I'm quite excited and pleased that you are here. My name is Themba Masako. I'm the acting head of the Wits School of Governance, and it is my honor and privilege to invite and welcome leaders of a political party to be with us. Let me just give you a bit of a background of what we are trying to do here. We are having an election series program, which is basically an opportunity given to leaders of political parties in a dialogue format, not so much in a mass rally kind of environment where political party leaders just come and deliver speeches. But here, we create an opportunity for a discussion, a conversation, where you as leaders of political parties will get an opportunity to answer questions and tell the citizens out there about your ideas, your policies, your thoughts about where you see the country going after the elections, the general elections. But we thought it would be important for us to also remind everyone in the room, but also those of us who are watching us online, to also understand that 2024 is not just a normal elections year. There are more than 50 countries holding general elections during the course of this year, and this includes countries such as Namibia, India, the US, and many others. The most significant one I always mention is the fact that these countries that will be holding general elections include India, which has registered voters of around 670 million. So if we think with our numbers here in the country we're running around elections, just keep that at the back of your mind and put it in perspective. And we thought it would be important to just create this environment, safe space, where our academics, our students, we also welcome members of the media to just pose questions to you. And my invitation is that you feel as relaxed as possible and give the best possible responses that we can give to the answers so that we have a flowing conversation. The session will be moderated by Karine Abrams, who's one of our top academics in the school. And basically, she'll be coming forward here and lead the conversation in the form of raising key issues, posing questions to all the leaders, and then it will be your opportunity as leaders to respond to those issues. But let me start by welcoming the leaders who have managed to be with us here this afternoon. But before I do that, let me also tell you that we started with the first series where the IEC was here to talk to us about their planning and preparations for the forthcoming elections. They also shared with us some of the challenges they're anticipating, but at the end of the day, they gave us the assurance that everything is in place for the elections to take place. That session was followed by a second series of conversations where we had leaders of political parties. We just selected the top three with the largest numbers in parliament. So we planned to have the president of the country who couldn't make it, but present in that section, in that session was the leader of the EFF and a representative from the Democratic Alliance. So today we're having two dialogues taking place. So it will be parties that are represented in Parliament, and then there will also be a session where we're inviting parties that are not yet represented in Parliament. But importantly, I just wanted to whet your appetite a little bit and indicate to you that, in fact, on the 9th of May, which is the next leg of the series, we'll have a panel discussion on women and gender in the 2024 elections. So we're getting experts and activists, not just women, but experts will be talking to us about the meaning of these elections and what they signify for women in our country. And that's going to be followed by a session on the implications of these elections on the SADC region. As I told you, we're not just the only country that will be holding these general elections. And that session will be addressed by Dr. Ivo Mandaza, Ms. Ishumile Qada, Brian Kahoro, Professor David Sibuduburi, and Professor Getsi Karuri Sibina from the school will be facilitating that session. And then on the 16th of May, we'll then have a panel discussion on the broader continental elections taking place in other parts of the continent. And that will have the following as our guest speakers: Professor Kabele Matlosa, Professor Antonia Simbine, Professor Karuti Kanyinga, and Professor Remy Ajibewa, and Palisa Sikhajan, that is doctor. So I'm just giving a flavor of what's going to be taking place as the School of Governance seeks to have these conversations with you. Without any waste of time, let me introduce the guest speakers, not in any order of priority. I'll start with the Honorable Mr. Velenkosini Fiki Hlabisa, who is the leader of the IFP. I just saw in his CV that he was actually a student at the University of Zululand, and I just mentioned to him that, in fact, I also spent a year in that university in 1983, but couldn't finish my year because of the violence that took place in that particular year. He's a leader of the IFP and he's led various structures of the IFP. He was appointed provincial secretary for KZN in 2011, and he became a member of the IFP's National Executive Committee. And in 2016, he was elected mayor of Hlabisa local municipality in Umkhanyagu district in KZN. In 2017, he was the IFP's Extended National Council unanimously nominated you to be the president of the party. And having led the IFP as the official opposition in the KZN legislature for 4 years, he was sworn in as a member of parliament in October 2023, taking the reins in the National Assembly from the late Nkosi Prince Buthelezi. The next on my list, as I said, not in any particular order, is Mr. Brett Heron, who is a qualified lawyer and former MMC for Transport and Urban Development in the city of Cape Town. He has an MSc in cities from London School of Economics and Politics. Brett believes in servant leadership and strives through good towards creating a better life for all citizens of our country. He currently serves as a member of parliament and previously served as a member of the Western Cape Provincial Legislature. So, Mr. Good, welcome and thank you for joining us. And you are from the Good Party. The next on my list is Aubrey Katsane. Your CV is quite long, but I'll try and summarize it here. Aubrey's work experience has been within the civil engineering and project management space for 20 years. Like any other young African, he has been giving attention and paying special interest in South Africa and African politics. Although his passion was never to be prominent into politics, he, however, developed interest as he got engaged with communities, both as a senior leader in the church and being involved in various infrastructure development issues. At the formation of the ATM in 2018, Aubrey was called to serve as in the ATM's executive committee as the Deputy Secretary General. It is from here where he started to be actively involved in South African politics, from being a branch leader to being head of elections in 2019, that's national elections, and then in 2021, local government elections, and now in 2024, the national provincial elections. Is that correct? NPE, yes. So Aubrey, you're welcome and thank you for joining us. And again, Aubrey is from the ATM. The next and not least guest speaker today is Professor Mthunzi Mdwaba, who's going to be speaking on behalf of the UDM, and it says he is a chief advocate and lobbyist for the UDM at the top here. I must also declare immediately that this young man is a friend of mine and was a fellow student at Wits, and we stayed in the same res. So always troublesome, I must say. But Mthunzi, you're welcome and thanks for joining us in this session. Prof. Mthunzi Mdwaba is a social entrepreneur, it says, businessman, organized global business leader, stroke activist, driven by human capital development. He was the chairman of the council at the University of the Western Cape, and in 2015 to 2018, since then, he has been appointed as the adjunct associate professor of law at UWC. Mthunzi Mdwaba is currently the CEO of Tsoro IBC and Tsoro Strategic Advisory and chairman of Y&R Advertising Agency. He is a co-founder and chairman of South African Norwegian Association and co-founder and executive chairman of Tuja Holdings. He is currently the chief advocate and lobbyist for the UDM, and I'm told a candidate for premier in the Gauteng provincial elections. So with those few introductions, ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna invite Karin to come to the stage and then invite our party leaders to also join her in the stage here and sit anywhere. So you can please join Karin in front here. And as I said, it's a conversation. So none of you are gonna be asked to give a speech, but you'll be asked questions initially by the moderator, and that's going to be followed with us opening the floor for questions. And to my team, for the previous sessions we've had, Mani and Kamantha, I was told that we did not give opportunity to people who are online in the other dialogues that we had. So can we try and also include people who are online so that they can also pose questions? So with these few words, Karin, the floor is yours, and thank you for moderating the session.
Thanks, Prof. Welcome, everybody. Good to see you all here, and also those that are online. Happy to see you. Thank you, my esteemed panel. I had a briefing session with them today saying this is the Wits School of Governance, so expect a little bit of spice from the audience. And so glad to see some of our students here today. Let's kick right in, and you can feel free to answer, in whichever order you want to. Across all of the different manifestos that we see from your parties, and you guys are these parties are particular kind of party because you served in parliament, so you have a particular kind of experience that other smaller parties don't have. But there were some quite big and sometimes radical ideas in these manifestos, some ranging from improving governance and some proposing new governance and architecture systems or institutional mechanisms. And so I'll just list a few, not directed to any particular person or party, but some of those big ideas around improving governance has to do with, and suppose this is a big one, constitutional reform on some level, increasing the capacities of traditional authorities and courts, amending the provisions and functions of core institutions of the state, reviving mechanisms of public institutions like the Public Investment Corporation, introducing a Marshall Plan for SOEs, the idea of revitalizing ESCOM, and ranging to quite radical ideas about a massive reduction of the public service wage bill, but also the bloated public service, and then some ideas around how do we get intergovernmental communications working better. But there was some radical kind of new proposals that was around undoing particular things, like, for example, undoing the CETA model, instituting new corruption courts, instituting a new national bank, a national immigration inspectorate, a national social security agency, a new model for local development, and a multi-agency anti-corruption task team. And so these kind of broad, ranging from small interventions to quite radical interventions, are present among all of the manifestos. What do you think are the kind of top 2 governance imperatives in the next 5 years? So with all of those proposals, in your view?
Can I start? Yeah. I mean, from our perspective, what we've been saying, and it says so in our manifesto, that on the 1st of June after the election, nothing will change unless we actually address the structure of government that has been underperforming and disappointing South Africans for the last 30 years. So we may be able to change the political leadership, but unless we address and reform and restructure the public service that supports and implements the mandate of the government, very little is going to change. So one of our key offerings to South Africans is to reform and restructure the public service, and that includes professionalizing the public service, reducing the role of political leadership in appointments of senior managers in the public service. There's far too much interference of political leadership. And then introducing systems that do not only, I'm going to venture now into the corruption space, but not only detect corruption after it's been leaked to the media by some whistleblower who's not really protected, but actually to prevent and detect corruption before it happens, and to introduce systems using technology like blockchain to make tenders and contracts far more transparent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, thank you very much, Dr. Abrahams, and greetings to my panelists and the people who are part of this debate. I will want to be not academic. I know I'm in an academic institution. The challenges facing our people are real-life challenges which are not academic. Indeed, post-29 May, there should be changes in as far as our government is concerned. I agree with my brother when it comes to the issue of professionalizing the civil service. Much of challenges are created by people who were employed through cadre deployment with no sufficient qualifications or skills, but simply because of political alignment. You need to deal with such, and you will need to begin with the audit of what you have. And those who are not relevant, it's either they resign on their own or you fire them. Yes, I know there are rules and regulations regarding employees, but people know how they got employed, because in some cases there are adverts which you can visit that look at the advert under which you were employed, you do not qualify. So just give space, because we want a government that is going to deliver. We need to pay someone who is competent in what he is doing. Indeed, the immigration system in our country needs to be revisited. we must have effective controls so that you do not have porous borders, and the system at Home Affairs will need to be strengthened so that you avoid a corruption where people buy or sell the documents which makes them South Africans, yet they are not. The reason why you must deal with the immigration issues is because you can't budget for a country where you have people who do not know who they are. Every person in South Africa should be documented. Those who are not documented, coming from foreign nationals and do not possess specialized skills, should be assisted to go back to their respective countries. This is not being xenophobic, but you want to account for everybody who is within your country, and you must know what he or she is doing. People seeking political asylum should be accommodated through a correct process. People with specialized skills, a proper procedure should be followed, because if you have a specialized skills, transfer such skills over a period of 5 years, and there must be people whom you must mentor during the time when you are hired or employed in South Africa, being a foreign national, because you have a specialized skill. Our judiciary system should be reshaken, because we have many cases which escape in the court of law. Probably from the taking of the statements, it was not properly done. Rescale our police so that when they take statements, the statements should stand in the court of law. Our prosecuting authority should also be sharp on its work and have dedicated courts to deal with corruption. We shouldn't allow cases that drag for 10 years, because it's costing the state and we are not seeing progress. On corruption, be firm. People who are corrupt should be, once there is evidence, be arrested, prosecuted, give them tough sentence to show that corruption is not allowed in our country.
Thanks so much. So your top two would be fixing the immigration system and fixing the judiciary. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning to everybody, the people who are here physically and people that are on Zoom. I'm trying to see where to start, because it's a very broad thing when you ask for two, in a country that's in a mess. We're in a complete
Two big institutional kind of
I'm thinking, but as I'm thinking, I just want clarity on something. You said SETA. Was it SETA or was it SITA?
No,
SETA.
SETA.
SETA. Okay, Sector Education
Yes,
Training Authority.
correct.
Okay. So I want to start maybe by fixing my CV. So we apologize that my CV is incorrect, Prof. It says I'm chairman of YNR. I'm not. I used to be a very long time ago. So I don't want to be in trouble for things like that. But also I want to give something that is going to be good for context. That's not in my CV, because we came in late in this, and I think people just rushed and sent something through. So one of the things that my past is very important for, and it's important in many of these debates, it keeps coming up, so if I don't say it now, I might not take people with me, is that I was also the first African to be the vice president of all employers in the world in Switzerland, an organization called the International Organization of Employers. That has about 150 business organizations, and South Africa is one of those members. But by being vice president of the IOE, born in 1920, I became the vice president in 2017. You can see how long it takes for Africans to get into these things. I became also the vice chairperson or chairman of the International Labour Organization, which is a specialized entity in the United Nations family, and it's got 187 countries, and South Africa is one of the members and has ratified. South Africa is probably one of the highest ratifiers in the world. This is very important, because when I talk about employment, I'm going to keep going there quite a lot. And in terms of the ethical governance space, I think for me, anybody who knows the UDM, in spite of our previously being categorized as a small party, which I said in another debate is the last time we're going to be a small party, we're going to be a substantial party because we're going to win quite a number of seats here and in the broader national environment, is that we've fought corruption since the party's been there. But I think the biggest problem about us fighting corruption is that we've had a very humble leader who tends not to want to brag. You know, it's also a very African thing that you can't talk openly about the things you do because people see you as being bragful, right? So if you look just at the last 3 topical corrupt cases in the country, you look at the speaker of, the ex-speaker of Parliament, the person who laid the charges was Olomisa. If you look at the Takatso SAA deal, the people who wrote to Scopa was the UDM. Just Pravin Gordhan was trying to push that and he failed. The third one is the one with Marcus, whether he shot himself or not is not the important thing because people are not sure whether he's dead or alive. But the point is the Steinhoff deal was also a UDM thing. And I mentioned those 3 very carefully because there is this impression that we try to give that the only corruption we have is in the public sector. Corruption is both in the public and the private sector. If you think only of those 3 examples, there were both people in the private sector, and it always takes 2 to tango, always. So for us, what we would change is how we approach corruption. First of all, we must do away with corruption. You can't set up an ethical governance framework without getting rid of the problem, and corruption for me needs to be classified with crime, because that's the same kind of level. Our criminal monitoring, policing, and whatever is abysmal. So whether you talk about gender-based violence, you talk about safety of young people at home, you talk about old people being attacked in their families and their communities, for me, that's the same area. It's crime, corruption. The more you clamp on crime, as the president here was saying, and you name and you shame and you jail them, right? The more you are going to be setting a tone for what is not acceptable. Because it is not acceptable. We've become a very structured, we've got a very systemic, corrupt kind of situation in this country where, for me, having been back in the country for the last 3 years, I'm discovering that you can't do anything now without being asked for what I'm told is a gateway fee or a bribe or something. It's like a value chain of corruption. So it's a lot. Okay, so that's the one bracket I want to just talk about. And we are, in our manifesto, we talk about anti-corruption courts, because we want to have a specific focus for something so endemic and so serious. The second part, really, for me, is a difficult choice, because you've made us get to this number 2. Is I guess, something that Brett referred to, but I want to take a different take on it. For me, professionalize, yes, but I know a lot of guys in the public sector that are very professionalized. In fact, that is the problem. I think that is the elephant in the room, is that they're so professionalized that they don't know how to deal with their corrupt masters, the political masters, right? Who threaten them through deployees. They deploy people in who are below them, for example, will be below the DG in terms of the hierarchy of staff. But you may not touch that person. You touch that person, you're gone, right? So as a result, because if you read the law as it presently stands, it tells you who the accounting officer is. The accounting officer is the DG government, that's it. The minister should only be coming in when he can prove that there's been fraud or some kind of funny dealings, in which case then he would write, the PFMA tells you, you will write to Treasury, you'll tell Treasury that your DG has been found foul of something, and you are now taking over. You are investigating and you are taking over. But they don't do that. They're too clever to do that. They're not going to do that. They're just going to come and threaten you and bully you and manipulate you. So for me, you need to be able to uphold the law. The law says specifically who the boss is, who runs things operational, who the CEO is. The DG is the CEO. The minister is a chairperson. So from a governance point of view, I've been chair and still chair in so many things that as the chair, it's not your business to be in operational stuff. You're there for strategic oversight. You're there to guide. You're there to counsel. You're there to back off when you're not sure of things, and let the CEO run things, right? So for me, this is very, very important. So those are the two I'm going to be hard-pressed to choose for now.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Karen, and to all the attendees of this dialogue. As per the introduction, we are still a new party on the basis that we were never part of politics before. So to us, instead of being a disadvantage, it is an advantage, because we come into a space where we find that 30 years later, after democracy, we still cannot tell whether we have achieved the objectives of democracy. Because if we want to test any kind of a project, whether it has succeeded or not, you need to first check whether have you achieved the outcomes of that program or that project. Are they related to the objectives that we have set for ourselves as a country? Now, coming into what is that we need to change, I will pick two. Legislation. Legislation can either be an enabler, but can also be a prohibitor. In other words, if you don't deal with legislation in the context of the environment at which, as a government, you have the power to change legislation, and you don't, because some power out there tells you that if you change this legislation, it's going to destroy everything that you have worked for. We need to do a review of our legislation. The Constitution. The Constitution is declared as the most responsive constitution in the world. But is that the description that can be given by the poorest of the poor? Can they stand up and say, this constitution has assisted us from where we were 30 years ago to where we are now? Does the Constitution address the imbalances of the past? Where does it say that? Yes, it deals with human rights issues, which were wrong in pre-1994, but it's not stating clearly how do you deal with the redress, how do you deal with bringing in those that were left out. It only talks about fairness, it talks about objectivity, but here we are in a country where the spatial divide is still there. You still see people moving from Soweto to Sandton every morning and coming back in the evening. That's spatial divide that has been done by the apartheid regime. We are, as ATM, we want to look and do a thorough review of the Constitution. Does it help us as a country to keep calm and to keep us happy? It does to certain people, but for the majority of the people, they are not gaining anything from the Constitution. Legislation, further on that, beyond the Constitution, we are saying that preferential, I'll take one particular act, Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act. It talks to how we are going to choose others amongst others. Because if we want to come to a space where we are saying we want to grow the economy, you can't grow the economy when the majority are in poverty. So, I mean, we are here with the academia. They would understand that better. That economics is about consumption, it's about investment, it's about government spending. So if you are going to spend money still to the affluent, still to those that were beneficiaries of apartheid, that change might take you 100 years, because the speed at which we are moving as a country to address the imbalances of the past is next to zero. Because only few individuals you can point out that we have made so-and-so a billionaire, we have made so-and-so to stay in Sandton where I used to stay in Soweto. But those are few. The majority of the people are still in townships, they're still in rural areas. So we need to look at legislation and change it to address what the 30 years could not address.
Thank you. You got some questions that you're going to follow up on later. Thanks for those answers. I think they give us a good sense about what we think about the now and what we think about the future. I want to ask you to think about philosophical positions for a minute. So, whether you frame that as a kind of ideological stance, questions such as what is in the national interest might be one. How do we frame the national interest might be another. Do we frame it in a kind of narrow kind of way that thinks about ethnic politics, nationalist politics, or is it a broader scope in understanding shared destinies, shared humanity, universalization of the social good? And then relatedly, what is the social good? What is the public interest? How do we think about the work that needs to be done? So some of these philosophical issues that are raised across the manifestos, the idea of a centralist state versus varying degrees of a capacitated citizenry, and that kind of balance. Issues like climate justice, is it simply something to manage or something to center as a survival issue? Ideas of the death penalty and ideas about what's our own moral codes, whether healthcare should be universalized. Then, as an urban scholar, I think quite a lot, you're talking about spatial divides, I think quite a lot about urban governance. How do we frame it? How do we think about it? So yeah, it's not necessarily the kind of actual interventions, but the idea about a decentralized state, the idea of different spheres of governance. How do you think about those kind of philosophical positions that your party holds? And so the specific question is this. Not all of you are represented at local government level, but how do you frame the work that needs to be done, either at local level or to change the country in terms of our key challenges? But we're taking a philosophical position, yeah.
Sure.
So your ideas about
This is a
the
problem
common
with coming
good.
to your university.
Your ideas about the common good. Your ideas about who gets to decide what the common good is. Common for whom, those kind of things.
Can I?
Sure. Yeah, let's start that way this time.
Yeah, let me attempt it. I think as a country, we are in agreement that we live in a society that lacks coherence. That is reflected by the level of crime and the intensity of what a person can do to the other person. Like a person raping a child, that tells you the kind of society that has been created of now the multiplication of people who lack coherence, who lack love, simple love for one another. So philosophically, you have to start to think, what is that puts us into a space where we are so against one another? Is it the way we were brought up? No, it's the way that life has brought us to a level where there's so much hatred. So, as the government, there must be a sort of a value system that, as the government, we can say, at the national, provincial, and local government level, what type of character we want to bring in. Because a character is something that can be something that you can be born with, but it's something that you can be influenced to live by that character. So the character that we are living in now is a character that says, what is that we need to do, we the people who are most privileged, towards those that are underprivileged. If we do that, if I'm a mayor, I've got a character of the society that I'm leading. That character will tell me that I can't be corrupt. That character that you are living in will influence you to avoid things that will not help others. Because a value system that we don't want to have a dialogue to say, what is a South African value system? what kind of a person we want to see in South Africa. Because we are avoiding to say others are blacks, others are Indians. So we should not avoid that. Let's get into that space and say, what is part of a character of a government that we want to build? Because the character of a government is a government that understands that I cannot do this because it will harm the majority of the people. But as we are moving forward as the country, we need people from the academia to understand that the people out there, those that we put into governance, we can't blame them if we have not ourselves put ourselves in their shoes. How much do they know of what they are doing? How much do they know of what is required out of them? So we should not be us and them as the people who are expecting the government to deliver. So that's a character that philosophically we need to come together and say, how do we build this nation? A nation-building dialogue.
Thank you.
I am happy to pick on this. I want to perhaps start this time by just maybe just mentioning that one of the things we say in our manifesto is that we need a big convention like CODESA and Indaba, because we've noted that there are so many complex things that we need to grapple with that need. So, unfortunately, that's why I was telling you about the ILO. I come from an environment, where you can't speak to yourself. You need to consult. You need social dialogue. And I've been trained in understanding that business, government, and trade unions, in South Africa we say +1, plus civil society, must be in one room, and we must find a way to deal. So I want to preface with that, because there's some issues that I don't believe, given the multi coalescence and the coalition government that is going to be required, and we'll come back to that later. It's going to be tricky to just think that you can, just make a decision like that. Happy to see one of my colleagues. You see, we've got very good women members in the UDM, so I've got two in front there, because you see, we're just men here. But I don't want you thinking that where I come from, we just only welcome men. Okay, are those yours? Okay, so the two of us, you see, we're doing well. I don't know about the other colleagues, but us, we're doing not so badly. But you're doing better than me, but there we are. So the prof did say I was a bit naughty, I apologize. So when we come back now to the philosophical part, you're asking very complex questions, Prof, that require huge, and I want to thank my alma mater, by the way, for doing this, because Wits is my alma mater, and it's time we have content politics, not sloganeering and screaming and shouting, and people have no clue what they're talking about, and we fool everybody because it's a populist noise kind of thing. And this, for me, makes us think. So we say in the UDM that corruption destroys freedom. It's very packed. It's a very pregnant speech. It's a very pregnant thing with many, many twins in it. It destroys freedom. Now, I don't want to be unfair to some people who've tried in the last 30 years. I think for me, I split it into two. I've got an article that's coming out in the Leadership magazine in the next 2 weeks, and I've given it a lot of thought, that it needs to be split into two, the challenge that we have. So the first 15 years was very promising in South Africa. It had an upward trajectory. And we were growing at some point, if you remember, 5% GDP annually, but we were not creating jobs, which is what I had to tell another colleague in another debate, because he said we must grow by 5%. I said, no, you're talking nonsense. We can't grow 5%, we need to grow more. We could never get to the number that gives us the jobs. Then in 2009, and this is purely just maybe a coincidence of history and the universe, is that we had the global financial crisis. If you remember in the ILO, we had to have a global conversation to see how we could change the world from it being a finance derivative-driven economy. Because if you remember, the financial crisis came from the derivative economy, and have a more human-centered, kind of approach, which, Ubuntu and all those things come in handy. So from 2009 to now, it's been a mess, which of course gets to a point where now it's almost a train smash under Cyril. But now, so for us, moral regeneration is key. Along the way, we've lost our value system, it's almost like when you want to do good, if I may borrow from your party's name, when you want to do good, you are seen as abnormal. I mean, that can't be right. So when you want to do good, you are labeled. Yeah, he thinks he's better than us. What? What nonsense is this now? Okay? Zuma, of course, was better than other people. He doesn't lie and pretend, he now tries to reinvent himself in that other party. But shame, failed miserably, now tries to be something else. But he used to call you a clever black. So you knew that he thinks you're a clever black, so then you must decide, what are you going to do? Are you going to be a stupid black, or are you going to be an in-between black to qualify? But you're a clever black, get out of my way. So all that shows you how perverse things have got, how messed up things have got, where you find now on the defensive when you're trying to do good. You must say, hey, no, you know what, I'm not. No, that's wrong. And then you are labeled arrogant, you are labeled reactionary, you are labeled all these labels that are used to manipulate and bully you, right? So for me, moral regeneration is important, but we also need to understand. So I keep referring, I hope my kids don't get upset, I keep referring to my daughter. I only have one child. The boys I haven't mentioned too many times in my debate, but my daughter is a psychologist, and she does drama therapy. She's the youngest of my kids. And I'm trying to get her to come back home because she lives in the UK, but she says, Daddy, fix the place first, all of you. Now, she always tells me, she says, Daddy, therapy is important, especially for us Africans. We think that therapy is something that we shouldn't be doing. You're seen as being sick or mad or something when you must seek for therapy. And why I mention this with therapy is because we're a highly traumatized society. Highly. And when you speak to certain people, young people, I speak to a lot of young people because of my social media involvement and so on. And they will tell you how when they are brought up in their families, they can't talk about pain. They say, you can't talk about pain. If you talk about pain, it makes you look weak, makes you look bad. So you always got to have it together. This is nonsense. This is nonsense. And if you look at South Africans, we had a colonialist trauma that lives with us. And we always think that if you think Western and you speak English better than other people, you're better. Not speak Xhosa, speak Zulu, speak Venda, speak Afrikaans. No, must speak English. Otherwise, you're not good, right? That for me is trauma. And because of that, we also have a huge disdainfulness towards each other, huge disrespect, Africans, towards each other. We respect anything coming from somewhere else, but not from here, not from home. That for me is deep. Then we had apartheid. It's like, come on, colonialism, then you have apartheid. And then you have black people who purportedly liberated you. Even that I want to debate one day. Being the one oppressing you now. I mean, come on, really? So can you imagine how much trauma we have as a people? So we need to find ways of dealing with that. And for us, we can't profess to have the magic wand or the silver bullet as the UDM. We don't. But we want to lead that conversation. We want to have that conversation with all our colleagues and say, come on, own up to it, right? And when you do own up for it, you'll see. Now, the second part that...
Is there this a part two?
There's a part two. Sorry, you'll forgive me. You see, that's why I asked if there was a time, because if you don't time me, you have a problem. I did ask for the rules.
You have one more minute.
1 more minute. Okay, so now you're timing.
Yeah.
Okay, so the rules can change, you're the boss. So when you deal with issues, for example, of nationhood, it's a tricky thing. When the Springboks play and win, our happiness index shoots up as a country. Our togetherness index shoots up as a country. And then they stop playing, and then we remember that, oh, okay, no, you black and you blue and you purple, you leave me alone. But when the Springboks are playing, nobody remembers that you are blue or purple, right? So for me, we need something that I want to come back to, because I used to be in the music industry, I used to run the music industry. We need like a Mendoza effect. Do you know Mendoza?
Yes.
Yes, Nkalakatha. Why do we need a Mendoza effect? Because we need crossover appeal. We're a party for everybody as the UDM. But for me, if you listen to Mendoza at rugby, people danced. Listen to Mendoza at football, people danced. Listen to Mendoza in the nightclub, people danced. Listen in cricket, people danced. We need something like that. That's crossover. That's going to bring us to, because we're a complex society, South African. Thank you. My minute is up.
Thank you. Yes, yes, it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doc. I will just concentrate on three things which the new government must attend as a matter of priority. The first one is the rule of law. Our country is a crime scene. Everyone doesn't feel safe. Whether you are a pedestrian, whether you drive your own car, you know that you are a target. Immediately when you arrive home, you lock the door, you lock the bucklers, because you know you're not safe. Our country needs a new approach in dealing with crime, and crime should be a priority matter, because it even affects opportunities of investment. Very few people will be keen to invest in a crime society. If you know, if you go and open a shop in a township or wherever, and you know you will be a target for crime, you better invest your money somewhere else. If you know that if you leave your mother, you leave your daughter, you leave your wife, you go thinking what might have happened to her while I'm away. To get a stable society, the crime issue, the rule of law, should be a priority matter for the government. The second matter, to have an efficient government, you must devolve power from being central to the national government, to provincial, and also to local government spheres. By the way, the concept of the three spheres of government in South Africa is a brainchild of the IFP at CODESA. I agree, we do need a second CODESA to evaluate that how far have we gone and where did we miss things from what we agreed upon in 1994 when we formed the first democratic government in our country. Now, the devolution of power should be a priority to the new government. The IFP will champion that, because if you devolve power, you give power closer to where people are. I'm an IFP, but I appreciate what Panyaza Lusufi did with Amapanya Panya, because that is the concept of the IFP. If you make the police to be controlled at a provincial level, you will have efficiency in dealing with crime. And if you can even devolve it further down to the local sphere, if the municipality have a capacity to run that aspect, you will have more efficiency in terms of dealing with crime, in terms of providing quality education, quality health care. And lastly, the issue of social and economic justice should be a matter that must be visited urgently. The inequalities between the people in our country is bad. The majority is getting poorer daily, while the minority, irrespective of color, because there are also black people who are getting richer and richer every day, the minority is getting richer and richer while the majority poor and poorer. So now the issue of addressing the social and economic injustices in our country should be a priority matter for our next government, because if we don't attend it urgently, we are heading for a revolution.
Sure. Thanks.
Is there any time left for me? Before I answer your very big question, I would just want to respond to Prof's question around whether other parties on the panel have women leaders, and maybe remind them that Good is the only political party in South Africa with a national woman leader, Patricia de Lille.
That's something better here today.
I think, and that's a shame on all of us, that we only have one political party that has a woman leader. But you asked a big question with lots of components to it. And it's difficult to answer in the short space of time that you've given us. But let's start with, should South Africa have a national interest, or is there a national interest? And we would say that there should be a national interest, and there is a national interest that we should all share, and that is probably the dream of 1994 of a just and fair South Africa post a repulsive history where we were divided intentionally, physically, economically. So the national interest must be to build a just and fair South Africa. But we're not going to achieve a just and fair South Africa post-1994 if we're going to build it without redressing or addressing the injustices of the past. And South Africa's big failure is that we haven't addressed the injustices of the past. So we are trying to build this just and fair society, or some of us are, on foundations that have not yet been laid in redressing our historical injustices. And there's too much unfinished business. My colleague spoke about the Constitution and socioeconomic rights. Now, we would say that the Constitution does provide for socioeconomic rights, but the state hasn't done enough to realize those socioeconomic rights. And it's in the national interest that the state at a national level pursues a just and fair South Africa, pursues the socioeconomic rights that every South African is entitled to by virtue of the Bill of Rights. And the Bill of Rights is universal, and a right exists even if it's not written down on paper. It's a universal right. But our Constitution has fairly developed socioeconomic rights. These have been upheld by the Constitutional Court. We've had groundbreaking decisions in the Constitutional Court around the state's duty to attain those socioeconomic rights. So I would say, and we would say, that there is a national interest in building a just and fair South Africa, but what we need to do is to deal with the unfinished business of the past, which has not been dealt with, and it includes the spatial segregation, the economic exclusion, the social deprivation, and those who actively seek to divide us and continue to divide us. And then maybe just coming down to your question around urban management, so going from that national to kind of the local space, we would say that there are powers and there are mandates that should be devolved to local government, and that we must perhaps have a debate around whether there's a function for provincial governments in our structure. What is their function, and what is the cost benefit? I mean, the cost of provincial parliaments or legislatures around the country, that's just the politicians, is 4 billion rand a year. Now we have to ask ourselves, what functions do the provinces have that they must have, that is best done at that kind of geographical level, that cannot be done better by a national government or by local government? So we support devolution of powers to local governments. By 2050, I think the stats say 80 or 85% of South Africans will be urbanized. And so your local governments are going to have the powers now in order to prepare for that urbanization, in order to ensure that people have the socioeconomic conditions and rights that they're entitled to where they live, which will be in towns and cities.
Thank you. There's lots of lovely questions about governance and devolved versus decentralized that we can take up another time. And I'm sure there will be some questions here. I'm going to skip over my third question, but talk about my very last question, but feel free to think about it in your first round of questions after we open to the floor. Today's sessions, this morning's session is parties that are part of Parliament, and the afternoon sessions, those that are not yet part of Parliament. And so this particular question is kind of pitched that way. When we think about all of the polls coming out, all of the conversations, and the way that local governments, the last local government elections happened, coalitions is front and center of our minds, right? But I'd like to kind of broaden the idea of kind of just narrowly coalition politics or government to think about collaborative government. So yes, we are nervous, we are cautious about coalitions at a national level, expecting the worst. We see how it works with hung councils and deadlock decisions, critical spending not being mobilized, and these constant games of dethroning and rethroning different leadership, and increasingly kind of leading to citizen frustration and then decreasing the legitimacy of the state. So we're nervous about that. But I'm less kind of interested in your take on that than I am about, as minority parties serving in Parliament, you have a unique experience of multi-party democracy and the idea of how different ideological opponents need to come around the table and collaborate towards what actually will work for the common good. So less about the kind of pitfalls of it, but yes, we're also here for some tea. You know, you can spill the tea later. But it's about kind of thinking about how do we move towards a goal together. Yes, we still have our ideological positions, but how do we build collaborative government and kind of argue in a way that benefits the public good? So I'll ask you to think about that while we prepare to take some questions from the floor, and maybe two of the panelists can answer now and two later, so that we can keep it moving. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to have 1 hour for you guys to discuss and ask your questions from the floor. And so I'm going to open it to you. We'll take a round of 3, and I think there should be a runner somewhere. And there's already a few hands up. Let's see. Okay, so we'll start at short visioned. So let's start at the front. We'll ask yourself to speak, and then Prof, let's take a third hand for this round. Yes, sir, in the middle. Okay.
Thank you. Is it one question at a time, or can I at least ask just 3?
Good questions, yes.
It's very good
Sure.
questions. I think that the first question obviously is around the discussion around professionalization of the public service. Now, we know that this is a narrative that already started during the ANC government, whereby this whole notion of professionalization is going to take place. But thus far, there has not been a skills audit conducted in the public service. The areas of where we are lacking professionally have not clearly been identified. My question is are we going around a narrative, or do we really feel that public servants are not professional enough? I think when it comes to those who are supposed to manage them and doing a skills audit around senior government officials, more your SMS members, you may find where people did not meet the requirements, like I think one of the panelist members have indicated, as well as whereby they have merely been redeployed. Now, my question is it all public servants that needs to be subjected to the process, or is it merely those that has been redeployed? Number one. Number two, we are talking about also a bloated public service. My question is in terms of what? If you look at the ratio of the South African population versus the amount of government employees that there is and the kind of service that we are currently having, is it really a question about bloating, or is it merely a question about redeploying and making more sure that the right amount of people at a government institution is there, it's in the right position, and not where you have an oversupply, for example, of nurses in one province and a lack in another. So that is the issue of the bloatedness. The constitutional reforms Is it a question of constitutional reforms, or is it a question of making sure that the enabling legislation is proper and that the government support to implement those enabling legislation has been addressed? Because it's clear that it has failed. It's clear that there is no proper support for it. And I think then the last and
Let's stop you there. Thank you so much. Let's move it to Prof. Themba in the front. Thank you. We indulge you. Nice questions. Thank
After
you.
that run, I'll ask one question to each.
In class, they say, no, she said what I wanted to say. Prof.
Thanks for the opportunity. Our leaders, all of you are our leaders. My question is about policymaking in your own parties. Because you've had your manifestos in place, but can you just give us a sense? I mean, as a school of governance, the word policy features in almost every classroom in the school. So can you give us a sense of what is your policy-making processes within your parties, and whether there's any scope or role for academics, students, to support you as political parties as you're thinking policy questions facing the country?
Thanks,
Thank you.
Prof. And then our last, hopefully single question is the person in the green.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Halman Shlomuga. I am a student at WITS. My question is not going to be in-depth and as long as yours was. I just want to know, if you guys were to win the elections, what issue would you fix first?
Which one first?
Sorry, what is
So there's-
name? His name?
So your name?
Alden.
Alman. So there's 4 questions. One around kind of the idea of coalitions or collaborative government. And then, no, not 4 questions, 4 rounds. Then it was about thinking about what does professionalizing the public service actually mean. Then what does also kind of idea of the bloated government service also mean. And we're not talking about constitutional reforms, or we're talking about enabling legislature, and then idea of policy making in parties, and then our final question that I'm sure is pressing. Let's start in the middle this time.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Doc. Let me start with the professionalization issue. Firstly, the IFP is not of the view that the civil service is bloated. It is not our view. We are of the view that we still need to employ more people to ensure that our civil service is efficient. That is our position. And we are cautious that if you say the civil service is bloated, at most, it will affect the previously disadvantaged people if you go that route. The issue of what do you mean by professionalizing? We mean that you need to do the skills audit to identify, is everybody who is employed have the competency in that position? Just do that, so that you clear that, yes, I have people who are capable, who are qualified, and I pay for what I get. And I said previously that if you find that there are people who were deployed as cadres with no qualifications versus the adverts or the job description, you simply ask them to resign. If they don't resign, you get into a process of getting them out of those positions because they do not qualify. It's as simple as that. On the issue of what is your process, Prof, in your policy making positions? The IFP in December last year reviewed all its policies. The process was as much involving as it was possible. It starts from our members, because the party belongs to its members, that they must be part of the process from a branch level, engaging them on issues policy by policy. We used our research team to ensure that we are responding in terms of our policy to the reality on the ground. And each policy team was given a latitude to work with academics from wherever, because we said we are open to every criticism, because at the end of the day, we want something that will appeal to the people of South Africa. So now the process has been an involved process across a variety of people. When we're dealing with the issue of crime, we involve experts in as far as dealing with crime is concerned, and policy by policy, our team was encouraged that don't be afraid to be challenged by academics, because that is what we want to get out of the whole process. So it was an involved process up until next time when we decide to review our policies. Top priorities for the IFP, my brother: one, create the environment that will create job opportunities. Deal with load shedding, bring it to an end. Do not have it on and off. Just deal with load shedding and bring it to an end, because we are where we are because of the poor performance of our government in dealing with maintenance, commissioning power stations and don't finish them, yet the budget gets finished year by year. So now the issue of how to deal with electricity is clearly spelled out in our manifesto, but as a priority, deal with the energy challenges. Thirdly, crime should be a priority matter, I explained before, because you will never have a stable community if everybody lives under fear. Fourthly, corruption must be dealt with head on. I explained also before, be tough on anyone who is implicated on corruption, arrest, adjudicate, and send a person to prison. Confiscate what was achieved in a wrong manner. Then fifthly, concentrate on education. If you do not have a quality education, you will not have the acceleration at a good speed for the country. So now education takes a top priority amongst issues we'll have to attend. Vocational education should be part. Don't concentrate on academic education only. Have sufficient skills, people that can start jobs, work on their own and employ other people other than relying on the government. And lastly, your healthcare system. The IFP is against the NHI bill as it stands because it is going to be a flop, like the outcome-based education, which became a flop. The NHI as it stands, it doesn't give any idea how is it going to be implemented if it does not have budget for it. So we believe that you must concentrate on the infrastructure. You must ensure that you employ sufficient personnel, doctors, nurses, and everybody you require in the health sector. I'm not sure on the coalition, Doc, whether we will respond later, because people should not be panicking on the issue of coalition. Coalition have come to stay in our country. We have seen in the local government sphere, all we need to do as a country, we must prepare for a coalition government post-29 May. That is why the IFP has been part of the multi-party charter. We are meeting every second Thursday. It's 24 meetings now. We're dealing with preparing for a new government. We don't want to see something like what we have at COJ, Eguruleni. We want a stable government, and you need to prepare for it. The leadership must be matured people in a coalition government, not think for their interest, but put the interest of the country first.
Thank you so much.
So,
Any, but not necessarily all. Any of the questions, but not necessarily.
Not necessarily all. How much time?
I'm going to give you 3 minutes.
Oh,
Okay, 3.5.
but precedent is important. I did law here at Wits. Precedent is important, and he's my president, so you can
Okay,
give
so
me
he
one.
had 4 minutes.
Oh, okay. So let's see. I think that, and we come back to your stuff later, right? Only the questions.
Fine.
So Astrid there asked a question about audits. So that's Astrid. She's the deputy president of a union, so you must be very careful. When she talks about professionalization and whatever you and so on, I've already responded my take on the professionalization, versus just upholding the law. But I couldn't resist the skills audit question, you see, because I think you're mischievous. It's one of my favorites. So we've never had a skills audit. So when you talk about policy, Prof, one of the things that's very important for this country is that we're busy building and coming up with policies based on a nothingness, right? So we suck it out of our thumbs as to what skills we need, what skills are in short supply. We talk about how we want to bring them in. Some silly parties say, open the borders. I've never heard such nonsense in my life. Open the borders because in Europe, they're all open. I lived in Europe for 13 years. I've never seen borders open, right? Because first you must deal with the situation at home, do a skills audit, know what you need, the whole country, not just public service, but all of us. Then we will be able to determine what it is we can now bring from outside. Bloatedness for me is also not in the public service. In fact, we have huge vacancies. Huge. It's part of the reason we're not delivering. Because we have thousands of people that are not being brought in. Why? Because we don't have enough corrupt people to deploy. So we'd rather not hire. And maybe one day we're going to have people coming out from our corrupt families to bring in. The same way we return money to Treasury, because it's not spent, because we'd rather spend it with our corrupt friends. So if you can't spend it, return it to Treasury. So we have a bloated political thing, though, the ministers. We can do with half of them. That I can come back to later. When you're talking about Prof. Maseko policy, so for me, it's similar. We've relied on a number of people, diverse academics, business, the youth, and so on. But that is exactly, when I used to lecture at the university in Torino for the ILO, because there's a university there for the ILO as well in Turin, in Italy, one of the things I used to impress upon is you cannot come up with what you think is a solution for society without involving society in its design. Very important. Because for it to have relevance, you must have you can't, for example, say to business, these are the skills we are preparing for you. But you haven't called business to say, what do you need? Why do you need that? So we understand, so we can do it together. So you need academics, you need business, you need the youth. We have a youth demographic advantage in South Africa and Africa. And the majority of the unemployed people are the youth. We have a huge innovative spirit amongst our youth, but we don't support them. We don't do anything with them. We don't ask them, because we've got this notion, what is badala, because we're old, we know. That's nonsense. This is nonsense. We need freshness. We need fresh perspectives and so on. But South Africa is a turnaround problem, Karine. So when you say, what do you fix first, Helman? It's tricky. It's a mess, mfowethu. So when you have a mess, first you need to say, we're on the precipice of a cliff. Me as Gauteng Premier candidate, and I contribute 33% to the GDP, 165 billion that is spent on health and is spent on education, but both health and education are in a shocking state. And yet we spend the majority of our budget there. So you can see these are important things, but should you start there? It's tricky. So for me, I would say service provision reinstatement, right? In its broadest sense. And you can't talk about service provision without, again, coming back to the Prof's question about policy. I don't know if people are aware, I keep asking, that we have no employment policy in the country. Does the Wits Business School know this? We don't have an employment policy. We don't have an industrial policy, right? We don't have a future of work, artificial intelligence, fourth industrial revolution policy. How the hell are we supposed to navigate anything, right? And yet we have the highest unemployment rate. the highest Gini coefficient inequality, the highest level of problems when it comes to competitiveness. I don't know if we are aware as well. 13 years ago, we were number 44 out of 61 countries in terms of the Institute of Management Development Global Competitiveness Index as it comes from Lausanne. Now, we are number 61 out of 63. We're about to get rid of the bottom. And we think the only reason we're not hitting the bottom is because Russia and Ukraine are fighting. If they were counted, we would be out. So I end there.
Let me take my round. Firstly, I think we have already spoken to you here, Prof, that the School of Governance needs to help the three spheres of government to say, what is that or the level of graduates that you are producing here that are going to take over to be mayors and municipal managers, and because we cannot rely on people who are cadre employees, whereas we can rely from the School of Governance producing the type of people who understand that tomorrow I can be a mayor. But the problem is that we produce people here who are so academic, who think that politics is not for me. I want to be an administrator. But immediately we produce people who don't want to play in the space of politics. We will always say there's no capacity at the level of governance. So professionalization is there, but you need to professionalize governance, because to implement a policy that has been done by people who are bruised, we came through the trenches, we fought, we need to eat now. No, they will develop a policy in such a way that you as a professional person, you'll find it difficult to implement. So rather, as we did with ATM, we can see all these people sitting here, these are professionals, but they are politicians. I'm a DSG, but I'm a professional. I don't shy away from politics because whoever is going to take a lead into politics is going to direct all of us. We can sit here and have a dialogue. They will sit there where they are and decide for us. So participation at the policy is fine, but also let's produce political leaders as School of Governance. Now, let's look at the Constitution. The Constitution does not have to be too detailed to say this is how you need to procure. But as soon as the government starts to implement the ideologies of drawing the poorest of the poor into the mainstream of economy, references will be made, they will be taken to court, and reference will be made to a constitution. What does the constitution say about choosing me instead of her? And if it is not talking to the redress, the 7 pillars of the constitution is about equality, it's about fairness, it's about objectivity, but at the end of the day, there's nothing that says, I might have missed it, but there's nothing that says you are going to address the imbalances of the past this way. And that should be something that by law, nobody can challenge. Because if it's not saying anything, the review of the Constitution talks to what Ntate Hlabisa is saying, that devolve the powers. It's in the Constitution. If you don't review the Constitution, you can't devolve the powers. Because the powers and functions in the Constitution, they say this is what national does, this is what province does, this is what... So nobody will say devolve the powers without reviewing the Constitution. So the indaba that Tunzi is talking about must start with the Constitution. So what we do first, let's review the laws of the country, because that's what controls everything that we do. You see, why do you think every second day there's a court case against the interpretation of the Constitution? Why people are still not able to interpret the Constitution? By now, we should be able to interpret it. Something is wrong with the Constitution. And when in the regulations that Treasury brought in to say regulations of 2017 to choose other companies that are preferred than others, they were taken to court. And the Constitutional Court says, whatever you're trying to do is not in the Constitution, so go back to your preferential procurement framework. Because government, the only tool that the government has is how to use its own procurement. You can tell people that I'm going to build roads tomorrow, I'm going to fix this. If the economy of the country does not have enough to produce for the government to have enough resources to do that, we can all sit in politicians and say, watch me tomorrow, I'll be fixing potholes, I'll be fixing this. But come the budgetary time, there's no money to do that because the economy is not growing. What is that we need to do to grow the economy? Is it about investment? Yes, but also draw the majority of the people into the mainstream of the economy, using your own procurement regulations that you have developed yourself to say, how do I bring in the majority? Are we still saying the people who are poor, who were poor before 1994, they are still living in the same life? And we are saying that we can change the constitution, we can change the livelihood of the people. We can't. So we need to agree as a society that whatever that we are promising people to do, we need to follow the steps, change the constitution, make sure that we use the procurement models that we have to draw the majority of the people in gaining something out of the constitution itself.
Thank you. Thanks for that.
Thank you. I'm going to start with the last question first and then work my way around. So, Prof, in terms of policy making, I mean, Good is a party that identifies ideologically as a social democratic party. We're social democrats. And so our starting point in policy making is we're social democrats. We have a set of values. We have a vision for the country. Now, how do we develop policy that can be implemented to give meaning and life to that vision for our country? All of our policies have been actually developed through dialogues with civil society, with academics, with experts, and with people with lived realities. So when I say lived realities, for example, our policy on street homelessness included academics, civil society that is involved in supporting people who live on the streets, but also people who live on the streets. So we had a series of dialogues as we developed policy, which includes academics, and would include students and Mayor Have, I can't remember. But it's been quite a broad process in terms of how do we give life to these values and this ideology and this vision for our country, but drawing on knowledge and expertise of civil society, academics, and those who have special knowledge. If I go back to the question, was Helman? The first thing that we would do as a political party if elected, the first thing, I mean, we've also got a 10-point plan, but I'm going to just say the first thing is that we would go to the budget, take it down to zero, so zero-based budgeting as a starting point. And the first thing that we would put into the budget before anything else is a basic income support. We would overhaul Social Security to make sure that those 10 to 12 million South Africans who are unemployed, who will not find work even if we triple our GDP growth over the next 15 years, will remain unemployed, that they have a basic income support system. And that basic income support system must at least meet the lower bound poverty line, which is part of our 2030 National Development Plan. So that's the first thing that we would do, zero-based budgeting and introduce basic income support so that no South African is living day to day without any income. If I come down to the professionalization question, the professionalization for us is about saying, if you are employed as an engineer, are you qualified as an engineer? So it's about, do we have the right skills in the right positions? And then are we using those skills and that experience? Because when I was in the city of Cape Town, for example, as a mayoral committee member, we were unable to attract young engineering graduates because they couldn't get engineering experience, even though they're employed as an engineer, because all they actually do is manage contracts that are outsourced consulting contracts for engineering services. So they never get the hours in order to qualify as a professional engineer in local government because they're not actually doing engineering work. They're managing external service providers who are providing the work. So there's two parts to it. Let's make sure that the people who are employed to do the job have the skills and the qualifications to do it. But let's use them in their professions and in their skills, use their skills and experience to actually do the work so that they can also develop their careers, and we are spending less on consultancies which are not necessarily efficient. And then just to your question around collaboration, I think that people would be surprised at how much collaboration takes place in the National Assembly. Even though the ANC, for example, has an outright majority, there are bills that come forward where you get WhatsApps and messages from the chief whip or the deputy chief whip. Will you support us on this bill? Will you help us? They have an outright majority, but there's lots of engagement around, are you supporting us on this bill or are you opposing it? And all four of us, actually, our four parties, we all joined forces with another 6 parties to get senior counsel to draft a petition to the president to say that he should not sign the Electoral Matters Amendment Bill that was just recently passed by Parliament because we don't believe it's constitutional. So 10 political parties with complete different ideologies collaborated in that way to petition the president not to sign a piece of legislation into law.
Well, thank you.
Can I just throw something on
Small.
collaboration?
Yes. Tiny.
ATM asked the parliament to the Phala scandal to say, President, just ask him if there is any case to answer. But that's where then the issue of one-party state becomes a problem, where one party decides to say, we will protect our president no matter what, at an expense of the state, at an expense of the constitution and everything. So there's nothing wrong with coalition government, but there's something wrong with one party just having too much power and end up not being able to observe the law.
My understanding was that we're coming back to that.
No, you deferred your right
Okay.
later, but there's many other
All
questions.
the movement.
But
Okay. No, it's good. Just wanted to be
I'm going to read out a few questions from online, but before that, I want to say, Prof. Robbie, who's the co-chair of this whole series, should have been with us today, and he would have loved the engagement and kind of diplomatically contesting with you, sparring with you here on stage. So, but I do want to say, there's some things that make me smile. If what does it mean to actually professionalize? Does it mean that how do we audit someone's skills? Do we look at their CV? Because their CV would show 10 years experience of the thing that they were doing. And then they would be, what does it mean? So it's an interesting one. I thought the idea, I thought some ideas about, when we were talking about the gender constitution of the panel, and what was mentioned here was, that, are they yours? Are they yours? I'm like, what? Sorry? Do they belong to your party? So, just an aside. Let me read a few questions online from the people there. Please, again, we don't have to answer everything, but as long as we can maybe think about complex answers that might reach these ones. So this relates to a comment made earlier, and I'm not sure who exactly speaks about. The latter speaker mentions a fix to the judiciary and immigration issues in the country, and I think it was yourself. Now what will inform his policy reformations to realize this goal? South Africa's immigration issues culminated due to high corruption in border control and management. Are lifestyle audits conducted on employees in this border control and their families and associates? What are the strategies you will employ to ensure that within the next 5 years, undocumented citizens are identified, deported, and prohibited from entering the country again without violating human rights? Do you think it is possible, and does your party have the capacity to realize that? Then a comment from Prof. Caitlin Mapitsa, who's one of the staff members. So far, and I don't think since, panelists have not raised the issue of the just transition. South Africans have the highest carbon footprint per capita in Africa. What are you doing about a just transition? Then, sorry, the first question was by Dima Katso. Then there's a question by Asipe. I'm happy to hear the current speaker mention, I don't know what this replies to. I want to find out why political parties talk in the same thing, yet the most current issues facing the nation are ignored because political parties want to argue who failed and then promising to improve from the same thing. Who's talking about the increased illegal armed possession in this country? That's the second one of Asipe. And then Dimakatsa has a second one. This is to the UDM rep. How do you imagine your party will change the narrative of moving from a political party interest group to a national interest focused one? And talking about the Mendoza effect is premised on everyone working together. What measure are you saying this to the youth? The UDM leaders' children are not good enough to be raised and schooled in this country, yet their opinions about the pains and realities of our everyday life should matter. Thank you. I told you can expect some spice from our students, right? And then another one by Asipa, do you know why the South African youth is reluctant to vote? If so, what has been done to address this? Because we need youth to move forward. And sorry to say this, but the members of parliament's time is up. We need the youth in these seats. Then these, you can take them as comments also. This was a question that Shante asked, but Helman asked it, in person, which is what's the one thing that should be changed? There's another one by Nicholas. The buzzword and probably reality is post. Okay, so that might be my question. Post 29th May is coalition governance. What's your position on this? So we mentioned that, so take it as covered. A question by Domiso to the ATM. You said that the constitution needs to be amended. If you were to be the ruling party, would the amendment of this constitution be something you prioritize in the first 100 days? And finally, two more says, I'm happy to hear that all the leaders are proposing a CODESA post-94. What are you currently doing to realize this? So I don't know if there's any burning questions in the room, but those are, so let's see, it's going to, would you like them to ventilate the questions? While we're going for mics, maybe we can just offer some brief answers.
I wanted to just respond to the just transition.
Okay.
If I can.
Let's take 1, 2, 3 then, 4. Okay.
Can I,
Yes.
while you busy, or shall I wait?
Let's take the whole round because we have to finish. So let's take, because those are already like 10 questions, but right at the back, then the lady in the front here, and then the lady here.
Thank you very much. I just want to find out from the political parties around the public sector wage bill. You
Just
know, there's a
introduce
News
yourself.
24. Sorry. Oh, my name is Solomon Mtombeni.
Solomon, thank you.
Yes, and I'm at the School of Governance. One of the issues that was raised was that the public sector wage bill is too high. And I saw the News 24 article the other day stating that about 35 or 36,000 public servants are earning more than $1 million per annum. But now, what the article fails to identify is that what is the wage bill in the private sector, and is it compatible with the one in the public sector? Because there's a narrative out there that says that public service workers should not be earning well compared to the private sector. And that is not good, because in order for you to attract skills in the public service, you need the best of the best, and the best of the best will look at the money as well.
Thank you.
So I think, can any of the political parties maybe outline
Solomon?
on their stance
It's
regarding
an
the public
interest
sector wage bill?
question
Thank
to
you.
us because we are training future public servants who are professional. Yes, that second.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sonke Basopo here at Vets. So my question is based on, because I'm hearing that a lot of the parties are mentioning crime in terms of reducing the crime rate, but I'm not hearing anything about looking into the factors that are contributing to the crime. So I wanted to ask, like, do you have certain measures that you put in place in order to look at that, or is it just we're going to focus into crime, making sure that the police are doing their work, or is it also going to look into what are the factors that are contributing to the crime rate in the country? Thank you.
Thank you. That was 3 and you were 4. The lady with the white.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity. I'll greet everybody in the room. My name is Lulu from ATM. My question is, okay, I've got 2 questions. With the high unemployment rate in South Africa, which I think the main reason behind it is the quality of education that we are getting as graduates that are making us not to be capable. And also companies will normally ask for like a 3-year experience, but they give 6 months internships or maybe like a 1-year internship. Is there a plan on how we're going to deal with the unemployment after winning the elections? Secondly, how do you plan on decisively dealing with crime rates in the country? And what is your take? Asking to the political parties, what is your take in bringing back the harsh sentences such as death penalty?
Okay, not to be confused by a prime in question for to be asked, but let's take the last hand here and then we'll ask some responses.
Harsh sentences, like death penalty. Okay, thank you.
Good day. I completed my MBA at the Wits Business School, so I'm incredibly proud to be here. Feels so good to be back here. My name is Letlogonolo Nogetsuamirai, and I represent the UDM. So earlier when I was driving here, I heard that you'll be hosting a panel of women and gender. I'd like to request that you consider inviting the UDM to be part of that panel. The first question I have is regarding measures we can take collectively to ensure that SOEs deliver their developmental mandate without political interference. I've served on a number of state-owned entity boards, and I will just tell you that it is immensely challenging to execute one's fiduciary duty given the political interference. So I'm just curious how we can tackle this mammoth task.
Thank you.
And then the second and last question is regarding each party's position regarding cadre deployment. Would you retain it? Would you not retain it? If you retain it, how will you manage it? Thank you.
Thank you. So lots of questions. Of course, we're not going to have time to answer all of them, but let's say again, about 4 minutes each to cover whichever ones you want to, especially those that were directed to you guys, but not necessarily the ones kind of primed by the entourage, because you know, it might, we can read about it in a manifesto. But yeah, thank you.
Can I tackle
He
the
wanted
crime?
to start with just transition.
Yes, okay.
I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to respond. I said earlier that our party has got a set of values and a set of policy positions. And our policy positions are really simple: spatial justice, economic justice, social justice, and environmental justice. And the just transition goes through all of those. All 4 of those pillars. But in short, with regards to the just transition, we hold the position that the coal-fired power stations, their lifespan should not be extended beyond the existing lifespan that is built as part of their design, and renewable energy should be introduced into the mix increasingly. And the just transition is reskilling people to transition from working in the coal industry and in the communities that are supported by the coal industry, by the fossil fuel industry. We've seen the disaster recently with the attempt to do a just transition project. I've forgotten the name. Is it Kusile, where the Department of Environment focused only on those employed in the power station and ignored the community that relies on the mining industry and the opportunities that are developed. So we support the transition to renewable energy, and we insist that it must be a just transition, including those that are not only in the industry, but those are in the communities that rely on the income that is generated through mining.
Any of the other responses?
Yeah, and maybe the question at the back around whether public servants should be paid less than the private sector. No, I think that in fact, the public service has got a greater responsibility than anybody employed in the private sector. Your responsibility is to the public good and to serve the public, and particularly people who don't have access to many services that affluent people can buy in the private sector. So we would say that we need the best skills in the public sector, and we have to pay for those skills. So we're not saying that we need to. We expect public servants to earn half of what you would earn in the private sector. We want those good skills in the public sector, so that South Africans who rely on the public sector for services and for their daily lives are actually given those services to the best that the state's ability.
I think I have a similar response on the question of should the public service be paid less? The answer is no. Pay according to the qualification, and you must prioritize to give the public sector sufficient salary in order to have them performing to the best of their abilities. On the question of harsh sentence regarding crime, the IFP believes you must be tough to crime and criminals if you want to stop it. Yes, my sister, you can consider the causal factors, but the priority, just stop crime. While you are concentrating that people are unemployed, they end up getting into criminal activities, create an environment that will create job opportunities, but stopping the crime should be a focus point. Everybody should know that we need a crime-free society. Whatever problem you have, it doesn't allow you or make you have a right to get into a criminal activity because you say you have a problem, because you are affecting other people's lives simply because you have a particular problem as an individual. Bloated service, I think we responded to that one, but the other aspect, which my brother touched a bit, our cabinet is too big. There are so many ministers we don't need as a country. The IFP says immediately after 29 May, if people give us a mandate, cut the bloated cabinet. There are deputy ministers we don't need. Yes, other ministries are big. They need deputy ministers, but not all of them. We are doing a study as we speak as to which ministry should not have a deputy minister, because there will be no time to start thinking after 29 May, you must act after 29 May that no, this one, you go. We don't need the deputy minister on this one. Yes, here we do because of the size of the ministry. Youth, yes, but you must have a mix. Young people as ministers, it's good, but you must mix them with people with experience, because if you will just simply go that you want young people, you might go wrong, because young people should be learning from the people who have been in the process. So now the question of saying people who are old must go might be a reckless statement, but a mix is appreciated. for young people to get into position in government, they must participate. The youth apathy in terms of participating in the election process cannot be solved by simply becoming ministers, but yet you are not influencing the process. So now, especially because this is a learning institution, the majority, not majority, but many people who are young in age constitute a bigger portion of the 14 million dormant voters who are registered but not going to the voting station. This year's election should be a turning point in our country. We expect everyone to participate in making a choice, read manifestos, and decide who speaks something that is meaningful. Because not everything that is nicely written is possible to happen. But you must interrogate the manifesto and say this under circumstances, this one has failed somewhere, it is likely to fail again here. Why do you go for something that has failed somewhere other than going for something that has proved that it can turn things around in the country? The documentation of the foreign nationals, it is possible. South Africa is divided into ward to ward system. There is no one who lives outside the ward. Everybody is within a ward. So if you have a government that is committed, that I want to know who are citizens or people within the borders of South Africa, it is easy to do it. But if you have a lazy government, it can keep on saying it cannot be done. Why it can't be done while other countries can account who is within their borders. Now, I think I can end there.
Okay. The 100 days of us being in parliament or in government, yes. The issue of the constitution, it's real. It's something that we need to sit down, all of us, and find a space where we can all agree. If we agree, the outcome of what we agree on will be reflected by the livelihoods of the people on the ground. So that is what we are going to look at. In terms of crime interchangeably works with the education system. Yes, I know that we are talking about dealing with crime decisively because we cannot have a situation where people commit heinous crime and they go scot-free without being attended to. So at the ATM, we are very firm on that to say, if you continually commit the same crime, that shows that you are not a person that can be acceptable to the society. Death penalty is for you. Because if we are saying capital punishment used by the apartheid regime to deal with their own interest, we are not talking about that. The human rights remain important. But what is important is that if you take somebody's life now and you take another person's life and another person's life, what is that you deserve as a person? Do you deserve human rights? Well, we are denying so many people their human rights. So that debate cannot be looked at and shoved under the table. We need to find a way to say, this kind of a society of not dealing with crime that is so heinous that people are afraid everywhere they go. One example, two examples, people will shy away from something that is so cruel. Because if it happens to somebody, it has not happened to me. The feeling that that person has and the scars that person will carry of seeing how gruesomely my mother was raped and murdered, we are creating an angry society. But if people see us dealing with crime, to say, if you have done something that is in this manner, not everybody must go through that, but if it has been proven beyond reasonable doubt that this kind of a person, keeping him for life imprisonment, giving him 500 years of life imprisonment, why are we keeping somebody who has committed such a crime 500 years to do what? But if they know that even if I'm 10 years old, I'm 20 years old, I'm 50 years old, what is important, I must respect the life of a human being. Because because the life of the human being is very important. We can't have people crying every day. You watch television, there's people crying. Why are we not doing anything about it? But parallel to that, we have to deal with the factors that are contributing to crime. I will repeat this, Doc, that the spatial divides that were done by the apartheid regime that are propagated now by the current government, creating youth. You know how difficult it is as a parent, a single parent, to have a 15-year-old living alone as a lady or a girl, 15-year-old girl, because you are renting an apartment in Midrand so that you can be closer to work, but your child is staying in Soweto. Now, every night when you sleep as that single parent, you think, what could happen to my child? And because of the spatial divide that has been created by the economics of the 30 years of democracy, we cannot bring closer the industrialization of the townships so that a mother can go to drop her child at school. People who are living in the suburbs, they all drop their child at school and fetch them because that's how they're protecting their children. But what about the majority of our people who have to leave their children? The young boys are now under the influence of alcohol, they are abusing drugs, they are substance abuse because parents are not there. The parents wake up at 4 a.m., go to work and come back at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. They've never seen the child for a whole week. The next day, the child is involved in crime. Now, when the child is involved in crime, you don't even know how to deal with the child because you have been away for work for years when this child was growing. So those are the contributing factors that we need to do. Then the education system, surely there's something that is not going right. When somebody leaves secondary education, he has no clue what he's going to find here. There is no interlink between secondary education and tertiary education because they should be starting at grade 10 to understand that I want to study in the Wits School of Governance at grade 10. And these are the courses offered there. And whatever I'm doing now, I'm doing so that I can be able to be part of the School of Governance in Wits University. But if we just walk in here and we don't even know what we are going to get as education from this institution, it's because I don't know anything between the secondary school and the tertiary education. And if we don't attend to these things, they will always give us an understanding that the education system is failing. But the education system is failing because we are not producing industry-ready graduates. Industry-ready graduates are people who have masters, people who have honors degrees, but they don't know where to fit into the industry. Because the industry says, I don't see where you are going to work here. I'm running an engineering company. I can only employ engineers. I'm running an HR company. It does not have work because the economy is shrinking, so there's no work for you. So let's look at what the industry requires and produce what the School of Governance is what needs to be made to be expanded more because we need government professionalization, not only of officials, the governance itself from the president to the mayor to everybody. So if we look into that, then we will change the situation.
No, from your lips to God's ears. And last but not least.
So I'm going to need my 7 minutes.
No,
because I've been watching.
5.
So we can't discriminate, you know.
It was 5.
May I watch those things?
Me too.
It's important. No. He spoke for 7 minutes. I love him, but he spoke for 7 minutes. So I'm sorry. I want my time too. So let's start. So here's the thing. We talk about the Constitution. We talk about a lot of things about governance. And you know, I've listened to this constitutional conversation. And because we wanted to, of course, work with the time, there are a lot of challenges about talking about, as you said, the most responsive constitution, and yet it's not responding to the people. And we gloat about it being the best combination of the German and the Canadian constitution and so on. Very developed countries, very removed from Africa, very removed from developing issues and state developmental issues. For me, that requires a revision of some sort. We need to look into that together. The second thing I want to just mention here is the School of Governance. is to look at things like the King Code as well. Remember I talked about the private sector. I've never really liked the King Code, but I never knew why. It took me a long time to figure it out. Because it focuses on the financial aspects of life. It does not look at the human capital development of life. It is related to the derivative economy that caused the trouble, not the one that is sensitive to people and human beings and Ubuntu. For example, when you talk about traditional healers and people who are steeped in tradition, you can't take leave in terms of the King's Code. They're going to tell you, we are Shanyalo. She's mad or he's mad. Why is he taking leave? Because we are Twasa. But Twasa is part of who we are. It's part of our tradition, it's part of our heritage. So we need to revisit a lot of things that we've allowed colonialist principles to be seen and elevated because they are Western on a level that is much higher than they deserve. So, but we don't have enough time to talk about this, so I'm going to leave it just there. When you talk about a just transition, I agree with a lot of the guys, crime, everything, except for one little thing that I want to just stress on. When we talk about a just transition, let's also remember that the people who are the leaders of a just transition are the ones who took all our things and left and developed themselves whilst they were making sure we don't develop. Let's not forget that. So we must be careful not to have a repetition of things happen to us when we're not ready for them. We must have a just transition, but we must be ready for the parts that we must move and transition from. Because, for example, coal being the elephant in the room, we can't just toss out coal without having alternatives that are very clear for our people when we already have the highest unemployment in the world and have the highest inequality and so on, and then toss things out that are going to create even bigger problems for us. And I'm also a business and human rights scholar. For me, it's very important to link it to those business and human rights aspects. You know, in terms of the Ruggies principles, where you talk about the duty to protect and respect and the remedy principles. Those are very, very important. We must not forget those as we look at how communities are going to relate to these changes and these transitions. We must not patronize people. We must work with the people in doing that. The people are asking how we change the narrative as the UDM. The first thing we need to do is to have leaders. Right now, we've got people in authority. I want to repeat that. We have people in authority. People in authority are not necessarily leaders. When you find yourself in a position of strength and power, in fact, people who thrive on power, I want to tell you, are not good leaders. Because you can't be a leader if you don't manage to have a balance between power, love, and wisdom. If you don't do those three, I mean, look at any of the people that are there now. Can you see those three? Zero. Right? So for me, we need to look at that from a leadership point of view. When you talk about the youth and the undecided vote, I want to appeal to the youth. I've seen it in the meetings I've been in, that it's not just theory, that, you know, there's 11 million undecided voters, there's 5 million first-time voters. It's true. I've seen it in some meetings where people say, if you're in a group of 50 people, half of them have never voted, half of them don't want to vote, and we must vote. Why? Listen to Beyonce. Me, I like musicians, you see. Beyonce says, power is taken, it is not given. Take the bloody power, young people. Economic dispensation, very important element of the CODESA, but you know, we all have agreed on it, so we need to go back to that, because there was no economic dispensation, there was social. And we were so excited as black people that we got to vote, we forgot to talk about the money. We mustn't make that mistake again. Okay? Public sector, I agree with my colleagues. Sisonke, I think it is it Sisonke, who asked about the factors contributing to crime. So this one is very complicated. I mean, I was on radio yesterday and I was in a debate last week with the DA. Shocking that we can listen to such rubbish. So the DA talks about how they want to build everything on SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. Now, this is one of my areas of specialty, and this is what I've lived for 13 years. So for me, it's the best way of explaining our failures. But it's not something you can structure how you're going to run a government on, because it's aspirational and inspirational, right? So SDG 1, for example, is no poverty. Big contributor to crime because we've failed. We have huge poverty. SDG 2 is zero hunger. People are hungry, right? And that daughter of mine I spoke about doesn't want me quoting this particular person because she says this person was racist, but the quotation I like, so I'm going to repeat it. There's a quotation that says, other people never see God until they see a slice of bread. This is critical. The third thing, SDG 3, is on health. SDG 4 is on quality education. He was talking about education. We have an education, but is it qualitative? I don't know. The jury is out. Because we have people who are finalized their studies but still can't read or write. I mean, for me, that's complicated. But we also need to find a way of not talking about training people for the sake of training, like this rubbish, Nasis Pani and the Presidential Youth Initiative. Rubbish, rubbish, rubbish. Because all they do is train people that are going to work for 3 months and 6 months, and then they end up claiming from the UIF. And they've spent 23-point-something billion on that. Nonsense. That's how you do it. When you look at affordable energy, economic activity, and decent work, that's SDG 8. I don't have to tell you how we are failing people. There's no decent work, there's no economic activity, there's no enterprise creation, there's no sustainable enterprise creation. If there's no sustainability in enterprise creation, you ain't gonna get an economy that is sustainable. It's simple as all that. How many minutes do I have now? So you look.
You went to 6 of your
Okay,
7
I'm done.
promised minutes.
Okay, let me get it, let me wrap up, okay? There's no support for the youth. I want to repeat that. There's no support and enablement for the youth. Now, there's a part of me that agrees. I agree with the mix that you must have, for example, youth and old people. But you must be very careful with this. You know, the youngest prime minister in the world came from Finland. She was 28 years old. And she's run it well. She's run it amazingly, okay? They try to attack her, these old folk, with many excuses that, you know, she was found at a party. I mean, she's 28, she must go to a party, for heaven's sake, right? But it doesn't mean she's less capable because she went to a party, right? So we need to look at that, because sometimes when you look at youthfulness, you can't argue that because there's no wisdom and experience. Sometimes the young people mustn't learn from us. They must unlearn. Yeah, we are messed up. We've been intoxicated. Well, that's why we voted for the ANC for so many years, because they've messed us up. You know, it liberated you and you were fooled. No, okay? Apartheid architecture must change, I agree. Has to change. Lulu, question on graduation, I think it's covered. I'm not going to, whatever it is, I don't care, me, it must be harsh. Jail them, throw the keys away. If you have to take them, take them. Singapore model and all of that. Cadre deployment, everybody in the world works with people they know. Everybody. There's nobody who's going to tell me that I can't work with Prof. He's going to work with me. He's my friend. But when he works with me, he needs to know that I'm competent. I'm not going to make the School of Governance look silly, right? And he must surround me with people that know better than me, without egos, to say, Mthunzi, this part is not your strength. Can we get another young person here to help you and, you know, impart knowledge and so on and so on? I'm done. But the 3 things we have not talked about that I would want on another day to talk about, no debate talks about them, and it worries me to the core. Productivity. Nobody talks about productivity in this country. I was chairman of Productivity SA till I was kicked out by that stupid noise. Now that for me, you can tell them, I said this, it's not the School of Governance.
It's been streamed.
Yeah, he's a fool. So productivity is important. You can't talk about competitiveness without talking about productivity. It's impossible. Okay. You have to total factor. Informal sector. Nobody talks about the informal sector, the Kasi economy, the township economy. I'm sorry, guys. 65% potential for growth comes from there, and mental health issues. We need to talk about that on another day.
So let's thank these political representatives for their thoughts and us seeing through their lenses for a little while. These interesting debates. Thank you for joining us. Oh, yes, let's clap for them now. You might have a chance over tea to heckle them some more, but if you like what you see and you say we're doing a good thing here at the School of Governance, take a flyer, take a leaflet, come to our seminars, tell your people to come to our courses. We're still running the election series this afternoon. There's a session on political parties and independent candidates that have not yet served in Parliament, an important distinction. And then next week, there are a few. Please have a look on our website, and our YouTube channel, our new TikTok channel, and we invite you after this for some refreshments that will be, I think, in the foyer. But let us again thank our guests for joining us and offering us their thoughts, their candor, and their thoughtfulness. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really miss you.
Thank you. And we're on TikTok and
Oh.
X and LinkedIn and other things. Can fund us.